All right, welcome to Club Fantasci. We are interviewing Chevee Dodd, and we're going to talk about his cool new project, Pull, that's on Kickstarter right now. Hopefully, you've checked out some of the reviews that have been put out there. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so now we were just kind of going over a few things. This is not your first game, but it is your first Kickstarter game.
Yes.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what made you decide to go with Kickstarter versus shopping this to a publisher?
Well, to be honest, I kind of did shop this to publishers. That's kind of unfair. I never officially sat down and demoed it to publishers, but I talked to quite a few about the fact that I had this game, and it's kind of inspired by trick-taking games. And with every publisher I talked to about it, immediately as soon as I said that, they were like, "Yeah, we don't do trick-taking games." And I understand why. It is a very limited market. So I thought it was kind of a perfect fit for Kickstarter. To give people the chance to say, hey, we really want to see this happen. So it just kind of fit. It was a good first project, I think.
I mean, with Teach You out there and some other games, I mean, there's definitely a market for it. Why do you think that this one is so hard for them to grasp?
Because it's not Teach You. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. I play Teach You every week. I do not play Pool every week. It is a different game completely, and it is unlike any trick-taking game you've ever played. So it's got a lot of unique spins on it that maybe make it seem a little different.
Too far out there?
Yeah, maybe it's aloof. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, now when I printed it out, because I've got Teach You, and I've played lots of trick-taking games in my life, but I don't normally go out looking for those if I'm going to purchase a board game. But when this came out, it really intrigued me because you have something very unique in it where you have two tricks going on at the same time. How did you come up with that?
Well, that was, if I could say the theme, that's really it. How do you put theme in a trick-taking game? Well, I made it about shooting clay targets. And not knowing basically nothing about shooting clay targets, I started doing research, and I discovered there was this form called sporting clays, and it's I think it's a British form of clay target shooting where you move from station to station, and at each station they shoot two targets, and you get one for each barrel of the gun, and there you go. And they come out at different angles, and I was like, hey, that's perfect. Those are the suits for the game, and if I have two targets out at once, and just kind of went from there. So this is a thematic trick-taking game.
and it really is a thematic trick-taking game. It really felt like it's the first time I've played a card game that I felt a theme attached to it. I thought that was something that's very unique in and of itself.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it definitely was inspired a lot by just the research I'd done. When I first had I didn't have the idea for the game even. I was kind of in a creative lull, and I asked my Twitter followers like, hey, I want to do a real simple game that I can put on print on demand and sell it for like $10. So it's got to be a card game. Give me some ideas, and I'll run with it. And somebody said, a game about shooting clay pigeons and make it trick-taking. Well, okay. So that's what I did. And so I had to do a bunch of research, and because I've never shot clays in my life, and so I did a bunch of research, and that's how it all kind of happened.
Now, since you're saying this, I mean, I think for anybody who's watching who wants to be a designer or maybe he's only got one game out there, how much time do you really put into a game normally before you start really, putting pen to paper and making it happen?
With me, it's usually immediately. I like to prototype as quickly as possible. I like to test my core system and make sure it works before I continue. Too many times I've come up with a cool idea, like, oh, what if I have a game where you pass the deck and and then you try it and you're like, this is terrible. This isn't even workable. So I just stop. So for me, it's important to try it as quickly as I possibly can, and a lot of times that leads to development breakthroughs in the beginning, or even I need to cut this part out because it's kind of crap. From there, with this one in particular, it was probably about a few days worth of work before I started letting other people try it. And I think there was a total of about 11 versions of the game from October to now. So
Wow.
A lot of different playtesters tried a lot of different versions of the game, and I don't hide it. I let everybody try it. This was really a community project from the beginning. community theme. The crowd. I crowdsourced the theme for the game. I crowdsourced the mechanics for the game. I crowdsourced my playtesters, and all of the design work. I asked hundreds of times on Twitter. People got tired of me saying, "What do you think about this? What do you think about that? How does this look? How does that look?" So, start to finish, this is a crowd-made project.
But I mean, that's complete transparency, and I mean, I would imagine that your backers have to love that aspect. They really feel like from day one that they were a part of this whole thing, not just giving you money.
We had 55 backers on day one, and most of those people had played the game or had followed along, and I got a lot of responses like, I backed this game because it's you, and I love the way you do this. And I'm like, okay, thank you. That's the biggest compliment I could possibly get. So, yeah, it's 100% transparency. I'm not going to hide it from anybody.
How has the transition from going from being a published game designer to doing it on Kickstarter affected you? I mean, what was the thought process of okay, I'm going to do Kickstarter here. I know that I've got something. What's that transition been like?
It's a lot more work to do it yourself. With a published game, a lot of people put a lot of effort to make. I'm going to make my game 100% perfect before I show it to publishers, and your game is never going to be 100% perfect. That's just simply the way it is. And my experience with publishers is they kind of want to see that you've got the chops to make a game and develop a game, and then show them. They're more than welcome to look at early versions of the game and help you work, through the design. And once you have those extra eyes on it, once you have that vetting process of the publisher telling you, all right, this part of the game is great, let's work on that. This part of the game, we can go ahead and cut that. That's a big, a lot of work off of your shoulders. Doing it all yourself, 100% from start to finish. I did the art, I did the layout, the design, the rules, begged for playtesting, worked on playtester notes. That's a lot of work. Pull has been the only thing I've worked on for 6 months now. And here we are. So,
right.
Whereas at the same time, if I would have handed this off to a publisher, I probably would have been done with it after probably a month of work. And then here you go.
Now, you just mentioned the design, and that was one of the things I put in my review that I really liked was the simplicity of the design because it didn't take away from the gameplay, yet it still fit the theme perfectly. And then when you're playing the cards, it really almost feels like you're doing some trap shooting. How did you come up with the simplicity of the design? Was that something that you originally thought that you needed, or did that just after play testing it you figured out this is the way to go?
From the very get-go, the layout of the cards hasn't really changed a whole lot. I looked at your classic family games like Phase 10 and I just had a complete brain fart. Skip-Bo, Uno, those type of games, and I wanted that real basic, simple layout that's easy to look at, and it's one of those games that you need to be able to see the cards across the table and not have to guess at what they are. Right. As far as the suits go, I honestly had to ask. One of my Twitter followers taught me a whole lot about trap shooting because I knew that there's different ways of shooting the clays, but I didn't know they had names, and so I needed some names for the suits. And so I wanted to make it all just completely clear. And my initial thought was I'd have these little suit symbols in the corner with a number, like a normal deck of cards. And then maybe I'd put some, artwork on the cards. But the more I thought about that, it's distracting. I thought I would just have this big suit symbol and a little number, and that's really all you need. Right. And then I saved some of the art for the targets where I've got the animals and stuff in there. So I snuck a little art in.
I mean, it's really nice. I was really impressed with it, especially doing the print and play. It still comes off really nice. I mean, I could use this and never actually have the real copy and be just fine. You did such a good job with it.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm never going to. I know some people give you the half resolution version or the color reduced version. Nah, I'm not going to do that. I changed the backs of the cards for the print and play. That's just because the normal cards are like black backs, and I didn't want anybody to destroy their printer trying to print those. So, right. The backs are reduced, ink, so that you don't yell at me for making you print off, terrible. But I always provide everything at full resolution, as nice as it can possibly be, because if you want to never buy the game and just play that version, that's fine by me. I'm not worried about profit, and markets and all that. I just want people to play the game.
Sure. Now let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Kickstarter. You've got a couple weeks left. You're about halfway funded.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? What are the next stretch goals that are going to pop out so that might entice some of these people to take a look at this and maybe purchase it?
Well, the first one is the shooters expansion. It's just a 2-card little expansion that adds to the main deck, and they add a little variety and shake up the play a little bit. But I didn't want to mess with that deck too much, so I kept it to 2 cards. One would be like a 0 card, so you're like guaranteed to lose the trick, but it also cancels your teammate's card, so your team you can guarantee you'll lose that one. And then the other one would be like a 9, and so you're guaranteed to win a trick. And then those 2 cards will actually have some custom artwork available. If we unlock that stretch goal, then 2 backers could be in the game. You could give me a picture and I'll draw you into the game. Beyond that, I have an Animals Attack expansion, which is a 6-card expansion to the target deck, which adds some new animals with some different values on them. And there's a little rule tweak that you can play with those if you want. It's entirely up to you. And then the last one was some score markers, and that stretch goal might actually go away if we can get far enough. I think I'd like to just replace those with tokens, like straight out. I've got the token add-on right now, which is for these really sweet acrylic tokens. If I did the tokens as part of the game, they wouldn't be as cool. They would probably be just little wooden tokens. But I think it would be a better option for the cards. So I'm kind of working with some different manufacturers to see how I can work those into the game. It's a completely new thing to me to try and figure out all this manufacturing cost.
When is the expected street date?
I have on the Kickstarter page, I think October. So that's probably about accurate. There's currently, I don't know how many are left on the Gen Con promised copies. Those will be advanced copies, and I might have got myself in trouble on those. The printer might not be able to get me the game by then, and if that's the case, those people are going to end up with 2 copies of the game. So I promise you, I will deliver you a copy of the game at Gen Con. It might be a print-on-demand copy, and then you'll get the real copy later. So those people might luck themselves into 2 copies of the game. I'm not really sure how that's going to work yet.
Well, as long as you try, right? It's all about the effort.
Yeah, I'm going to deliver, and hopefully they'll be satisfied with that. But I think I can if the printer can get it to me by August, then I'll be able to ship late, and it might be here, by September. So if I have to airmail 20 copies over to give people at Gen Con, I'll do that too. So it's no big deal. I'll figure something out.
Now that since you've done this, and I mean, you're talking about a lot of not socialism, but social aspects of delivering this game. So you've got all the transparency you had in developing the game. You're doing a Kickstarter, which is allowing the people to have their input and back you, and then doing things like delivering at Gen Con and whatever. How much different is that for you than delivered to the publisher? Do you enjoy that more, having that much hands-on and having that much input, or is it just much easier to go with the publisher?
Well, it is much easier to go through a publisher, but that's going through a publisher just means at the end of the day I get a check every couple of months, and that's a different kind of satisfaction, and it's not really one that I enjoy all that much. For me, it's the emails, it's the tweets, it's the comments on the Kickstarter page. That stuff is like the fuel for my fire. Way more than any amount of money would ever make me happy. Just hearing people who play my game, who love it, who tell their friends about it, that is the greatest reward I've ever received. So it's actually very addicting to get that kind of feedback, and this is at a whole new level. I'm used to getting feedback through my website. I'm used to hearing playtester feedback. I have quite a few people who are pretty loyal at printing off all of my games and trying them for me, and that's great. But this is like a whole new level of feedback. Hundreds of people I've never met before contacting me about it and telling me that they love it, and it's addicting. I'm not gonna lie.
Now let's go ahead and talk because let's let the viewers know again. You've only got about 2 weeks left on this Kickstarter campaign to go and
Right.
back it, and it's not expensive to back. And I can tell you, as somebody who's played it, it's well worth the money. So please go ahead and back this game. You won't be disappointed if you like card games at all. But let's go ahead and make sure that they know where to find it, exactly what it's called, your website, and all that stuff, and then we'll move on to some other topics.
Well, you go on Kickstarter and you search for Pull. I'm one of the 4 things that come up, Pull. You can go on my website, which is cheveedodd.com, spelled the way you see at the bottom of your screen. And on there, the Kickstarter link is at the very top of my page. You can find the print and play files on the Kickstarter page, on my website, or on Board Game Geek. I keep them maintained across all 3 locations. I haven't had any changes recently, so hopefully, we're pretty set in stone. And then, finding me on Twitter, I'm at Chevee Dodd on Twitter. I'm pretty much Chevee Dodd on anything you want to look me up on.
So you branded yourself properly. That's good.
Yeah. You want to email me? It's cheveedodd@gmail.com or cheveedodd@yahoo.com or cheveedodd@cheveedodd.com. Just you want to find me on Facebook? It's Chevee.Dodd. It's
perfect.
Dead simple.
That's perfect. I wish I could teach some of my other clients that. All right. Now let's move on. Now you've got some other games that you've done in the past, so let's mention those in case people are interested in those, and then we'll talk about your big news.
Okay, well, Scallywags was my first officially published game through GameRight, and that's a pretty awesome design. And the fact that they print mass quantity means that it's a huge game in 16. I think it's the same price as Pull. Actually, it's like $16, and it's a pretty fun little pirate themed kind of take that game. And that was a really fun experience for me to get it published. After that, I did. There's 3 games available on the Game Crafter. Similar to Pull, they have kind of either unique mechanics or quirky themes that are a little difficult to pitch to publishers. So they're on the Game Crafter, and I still show them around every now and then. And then, of course, there's Pull.
All right. So now, the other day you were on Twitter talking about how you were talking with Mayfair Games about something. What is that all about?
Mayfair, this was kind of a funny story. Last year at Origins, I had, last year at Protospiel, I met up with their lead scout. His name's Alex, and showed him a couple of things, talked to him a little bit. We had a nice little barroom chat late at night one night, and he told me that Mayfair was looking for some family stuff, and I said, man, I got all kinds of family stuff. After Scallywags, I started working on family-style games. And he said, well, let's meet up at Origins and you show me what you got. And I said, okay. So I went to Origins and I had 3 games with me and I showed them all to him and we had this kind of mellow pitch session and he was kind of like, okay, this one, whatever, this one. And so at the end of it all, I said, can I just show you something, I didn't tell you about? And he's like, yeah. So I pulled this game out called Chevee, and it's a Viking-themed. It started off as like a medieval city builder, but I ended up branding it as Vikings, and I had this kind of really insanely condensed version of the game there, and it was basically like 120 some cards and then like 10 dice, and they're custom dice. And so I pulled this out, and he's kind of like, I kind of give him the 10-second overview of this game, and he's like, okay, hold on, you need to show me how this works. So I started showing him this game, and he's like, all right, I want to take this with me right now. And I'm like, okay. Like, he's like, are you comfortable with that? And I'm like, sure. I don't really think it's. I said, I think it's good, but I think there's a lot more room with it. But you're more than welcome. He's like, no, I want it right now. I'm like, all right, we'll take it. So he took it with him. We met back up at Gen Con, and he's like, okay, we absolutely love this. Actually, it was a couple weeks before Gen Con. He said, you know what, everybody loves this game, but we want to try a few things, and we want to see what you can do with it. So he gave me some tips, and I kind of spent a couple of weeks jamming together a pretty well-rounded version of what they were asking for. Took it to him at Gen Con. We played it a few times. Well, I didn't play it with him. I played it a few times before his meeting, and I was like, I need to tweak some of this. So I took it to him, showed it to him, and he was like, yeah, dude, this is it. And I'm like, well, I need to fix some stuff. Let me work it out. And he was like, okay. He's like, well, tell you what, don't send me a game. Just send me the files, and I'll have our art department put it together. I'm like, huh? Like, you do that for people? And he's like, well, we do that when we're excited about a project and we want to work with a designer on it. I'm like, oh, okay, so that means you want this game. And he's like, I didn't say that. I'm like, all right, you know. So we've been working on it since October. They're still going full steam on it. So at this current juncture, there's nothing on paper, but we're all in on working on it. So I think that's a pretty positive thing. And we're slated to talk about it again in the fall at their big production meeting. So it could be in the future.
So that right there gives us a hint of how long it actually takes to go with a publisher to maybe get something done, even
Yeah,
with
bigger.
a simple game.
Yeah, and it's not a complex game. Well, it is, but it's if you once you play it, you're like, oh, this isn't really. There's nothing crazy going on here. It's just
Right.
it's one of those games that has a lot of cards, and so there needs to be some fine tuning, and it's got dice, so there's just got to be some fine tuning and that sort of thing. But yeah, with Scallywags, it was almost 4 years from when I first showed them the game till it was in my hands. And when we talked at Gen Con last year about Hedeby, it was, that's about right, 3 to 4 years before we would see this. And that's kind of normal for a traditional, big market publisher. It takes time. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of people involved in the process, and they want to get it right the first time. They don't want to put out a game that needs a bunch of development work, later on down the road. So,
Right.
it could be, who knows? Might that is a possibility. They could say, we have to have this out next year. Vikings are hot right now. Let's do this. Or they might say, it might be a couple years. So, yeah.
All right. So now
I've had some people tell me I have patience.
you kind of have to because it's no longer in your hands, really.
Exactly. And you know what? I picked them. Mayfair is my dream publisher. Like that, since I started this adventure 20 years ago, I wanted to be published by Mayfair. So if that could happen, that'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. Now that I got you on the line here, one of the things I'm always hammering into my clients is imagery. And since you are a graphic designer, let's talk for a minute about the importance of your imagery in your games.
Okay.
What do you think is the most important thing when considering imagery in a game?
Coming from, I got into this hobby through Magic the Gathering, and I can tell you as a former Magic player, every single Magic player knows every single Magic card at a half-second glimpse. They don't have to read the card. They don't have to look at the numbers on the card. They know exactly what it does. And that's because the artwork for every card is so uniquely different. You can memorize that card very quickly. And for me, that is the key to doing any game that has a lot of components like cards, is to be able to visually parse those cards at a moment's, just at a quick glance. If your card is so muddled with, it's kind of like the whole video game thing where they started putting, bloom on everything so that it looks washed out and sepia tone, and that's just, you don't need any of that stuff. Keep it simple. Make your graphics clear and defined. If you've got icons, they need to be, in a larger area so that they're clearly visible. If you've got like a little teeny tiny frame around your icon, it's going to make it really hard to see it. So bigger frames. Just make it so that I can tell what that card is without having to reach across the table, pick it up, put it in front of me, read it. That's just going to slow the whole experience down for everybody.
Awesome.
And I try and do that for my prototypes even, just because that first experience, when I pull that game out at the table, if that very first experience is a trudge to get through because people are struggling with my handwriting or they're struggling with the icons I hand drew on cards, that's not helping the playtest experience. So I try to even do it from the beginning. And
I would imagine that first impression weighs heavily into somebody's thought process. If they don't like the way it looks aesthetically, no matter how good the game is, they may already have a strike against it and just not like it.
Absolutely, exactly. And I'm not saying you have it pretty and it has to have professional art and all that stuff on it. I'm not saying that at all. Just make sure it's not hurting the playtest experience. And even when I'm doing white computer paper with handwritten stuff on it, I try to mark the cards that are similar. With maybe I'll just draw a big A on every card that's that card and a big B on the next one, so that quickly you can see, oh, A does this, B does that, in place of having art on the card, so that
Right.
we can just, it doesn't slow the game down for me to read every single thing.
Now, let's talk about pet peeves with box art. I'm sure you've got box art that just drives you crazy, or things that they do. What are some of the tips that you could give some of these designers about their box art to maybe attract more attention or make it easier for retailers?
It's got to be, man. So the big hot buzz today was Evolution
Mm-hmm.
on Kickstarter. God, that box is that's just terrible. The name, you like to look at that box. The name just looks like part of the background. Like, how does that? It doesn't even stand out. It's just, you need to have two things. It needs to be visually appealing, which their box is visually appealing. But the name, if I'm walking through a store and I look over at a shelf, I look at that box like I don't know what part of that box I'm supposed to be looking at. And while artwork is pretty, if I'm shopping, if I'm window shopping, I need to be able to see the name of your game as soon as I look at that product. I shouldn't be searching the box with my eyes to try and find something to focus on. Your name should be the thing that my eyes intrinsically focus on. So I just make that part stand out the most. The art is nice and all, and I know a lot of people spend large amounts of money on cover art because it represents your game. But once I pick the game up and have it in my hands, that's when I'm going to look at your pretty artwork. But when I'm walking through a game store looking at shelves, if that name doesn't jump out at me, then you've already lost me.
Right.
It's just the way it is.
All right.
So I try to keep it, if I'm going to have the name on the box, with some busy artwork, I'd like to have the artwork framed out so that the name really pops out of the box, or, even dull the background some.
Right. Right. All right. So now I'm assuming that your services are for hire, correct? So if people want graphic
Absolutely.
design. All right. So
Absolutely.
So that leads me into my next question. How does somebody pick a good artist for their game?
It's going to rely heavily on the theme and the kind of the emotion you want to invoke. Games are, unless you're playing something like chess, the game is trying to tell a story of some kind. And so if you're going to tell a story about, say, cavemen beating each other over the heads with clubs, do you really want to have like insanely detailed graphic art of blood spray and stuff, or would you rather have some fun cartoony art of cartoon cavemen? And so you got to figure out, what are you trying to convey to the player to make the gaming experience complete. And once you've got that figured out, then you can go work on art. Now, I don't really call myself an artist. I do, but I'm a cartoon artist, and so if you're coming to me and you want a magic card painted, I'm not your guy, And so understanding that is important. You need to look at the portfolio of the people that you're looking at. I'm a graphic designer, but if you want something, lavishly done, I can do it, but that's not my style. My style is very clean and simple. And so if you're looking for clean and simple, find a graphic designer who specializes in clean and simple. It's going to save you time, effort, and money. If you want something, if you want a nice, clean, non-crazy logo, and you go to a guy who does these over-the-top dramatic logos, you're going to end up finding that you're going to spend way more money with him on an hourly basis while he tries to figure out how to do what you want instead of doing it his way. So if you want something simple, I suggest finding a graphic designer who does that sort of thing, because it's going to save everybody in the long run. You're already on the same page. I want this nice simple logo. Can you do that? Yes, I can do that. Here you go. Research is the key, and it just seems like so many people fail to do the correct research. Even when it comes to just getting published, if you're going to go to I don't know. I can't think of a publisher off the top of my head, but you're not going to go to an RPG publisher to get your family card game.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. Just do the research.
Right.
So, picking art is the same feeling. You're going to have to do the research on artists and find ones that match your style.
All right, and so my last question for you, where we can help these people out who are looking to get into gaming, is how can they expect to work with an artist? What are some of the ways that artists tend to work with? Is it a project fee? Is it a back end deal? What kind of things can they expect to work with these artists so they can better plan their finances?
It is very different for every single backer, or I mean, every backer, every single artist. I know some guys who work strictly on an hourly basis, but those guys usually have the portfolio to back it up. Um, it's, I'm going to do this for you. It's going to take me this long. Here's my quote, and they'll probably nail it. It seems, here more recently, it's a lot easier to find somebody on a per piece basis. I'll give you $25 to do me this, icon or whatever. Fine, that's really simple. So, I don't. If an artist wants to do contracts, that kind of makes me feel weird. But again, it's all going to be based on the volume of work you're asking for, the amount of money that's changing hands. But it's very different for every single artist. I have done work for back end stuff, like give me a couple copies of your game, and here I'll do this logo and stuff for you. It's it's extremely personal experience. You're just going to have to talk to them. And almost every person you're going to talk to is more than open to just being, very open about it. Yeah, what do you want? Sure, we'll do that. I'll work for nothing. That's fine. You know.
Unfortunately, that's a lot of what goes on, I'm sure.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of it. There's a guy who's got. I mean, I don't think his Kickstarter preview is live yet. There's a guy coming out with a card game this summer, and he has got some of the most gorgeous art you have ever seen, and he hasn't paid a dime for any of it. It's all been, I will cut you in on the profits. Let's do this together. Let's achieve this dream. And he has managed to find some amazing work. And that's, hey, if you can find it, then go for it. A lot of people look for,
Absolutely.
and like you said, it seems to be the thing everybody wants. Hey, I need art, but I don't have any money. Well, then you're going to get no money art. And sometimes that's college kids, and you can find some pretty amazing stuff, but you're going to have to do all the legwork. If you go to somebody like John Ariosa, he's going to charge you, but you're going to get John Ariosa art. You're not going to get some guy off the street art.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, I think that's about all the time we have. I thank you for your time. Let's make sure everybody, again, understands where to go. They can go to Kickstarter and look up Pull, Pull, with an exclamation point. They can go to CheveeDodd.com, and anything else is just Chevee Dodd, period. So if it's Twitter /Chevee Dodd, Facebook /Chevee Dodd, correct?
Yep, that's correct. You'll find me.
Proper branding at its finest. All right.
I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in the world with my name spelled that way too. So just Google me.
It should be simple enough. We thank you for your time, Chevee. We wish you all the best with this Kickstarter, and let us know how we can help you. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, folks. This is David Lowry with Club Fantasci. You can find us at clubfantasci.com. Same thing, twitter.com/clubfantasci, facebook.com/clubfantasci. We appreciate you tuning in, and stay tuned for more interviews and more video reviews in the future. Have a good night.